Next on our 2025 financing supplements is the FHA Insured Loan Supplement. So jumping to the top of the first page, we've got the property identifier, which is the mailing address, and make sure that we have the complete mailing address is verified with the U.S. Postal Service at USPS.com, just to keep underwriters from sending it back if it's not complete. They double check everything against the postal records, so save a step and do that also. Then it's going to be that the supplement applies to the following described real property. That's going to be the legal description that you're going to find on the tax records of the county assessor. Then on the loan amount is typically on FHA going to be 96.5% of the purchase price, but not always. So you're going to get that number off of the approval letter. Typically, FHA requires a 3.5% down payment, so the 96.5% is the balance of that 3.5% down payment on the purchase price. And then within 5 days of the time reference date, the buyer shall either A, make loan application, or B, give the seller notice that the loan terms are unacceptable and that they're canceling the contract. If they give the seller the notice that the terms are unacceptable within that 5 days, then they get their earnest money back. So it's important to stay on top of that time deadline. Up at the top where it says within 5 days, they need to make loan application. If you watch the video on conventional loan, similar here with the FHA loan, there are several things that the buyer's committing to by getting a mortgage to purchase the house. So make sure that the buyer understands that the buyer shall pay any initial loan fees. Typically, that's going to be the cost of the appraisal, sometimes credit report fees, but most lenders charge those at closing, but they will have to pay for the appraisal up front. They also need to instruct the lender to start the loan process immediately, and they also need to let the lender know that we're going to need a written conditional loan approval, which is not the final loan commitment, within however many days you put in this blank. If you don't put anything, it's going to default to 10 days. You can put 7 days if you've got a long contract. Sometimes it'll make sense to put 14 days, 21 days, just kind of whatever fits with the contract that you're putting together. And just as a reminder, the conditional loan approval has to cover 4 different things. It covers that the lender has reviewed the buyer's credit worthiness and income and funds necessary to close. They've confirmed that the buyer's paid any initial fees, which, like we mentioned earlier, tends to be just the cost of the appraisal in Oklahoma. The appraisal has been ordered, and that the loan approval is not subject to the sale or closing of another property unless that addendum is attached to this contract. So those are the 4 things that the conditional loan approval has to cover to satisfy the seller. It's still not a guarantee that it's going to close, but at least gets us on much firmer footing moving forward with the contract. If we don't receive that conditional loan approval, the seller may, now the seller doesn't have to, but the seller may provide written notice to the buyer saying that they are going to cancel and terminate the contract unless the buyer provides the conditional loan approval. That contract becomes terminated on the 4th day after the seller makes that notice to the buyers in writing. So, and also keep in mind that all notices and all deliveries are considered once the broker or realtor yourself, once you've received the notice, it's the same as the party you're representing receiving the notice. So if you've received the notice, you need to make sure and get it to the whoever you're working with as soon as possible so that we can hit all of the deadlines on this. So next part is the buyer is going to have some down payment costs and loan costs that are associated with an FHA loan. So the main thing on this to remember is the down payment on FHA is normally 3.5% of the purchase price. Any FHA origination fees That's going to vary depending on the lender. There's some lenders that don't charge origination fees, some do. So make sure that the buyer has the opportunity to shop lenders. Hopefully they've done that and they have one locked in before you're making an offer. And then also on the top of the second page, we've got the property identifier again. And then if the seller is going to pay any concessions or sellers paying anything toward the buyer's closing costs, that's going to be the top of page 2. So in this example, we have that the seller agrees to pay $2,000 toward prepaids, escrows, origination fees, and any other FHA allowables. So appraisal requirements. This is a little different than the conventional loan addendum because this is talking about appraisal repair requirements, not the appraised value. So this states that once the appraisal comes in, if there's requirements for repairs on that appraisal, they have 5 days to come up with an acceptable arrangement for getting those repairs made. And if there isn't a written agreement within that 5-day period, then the contract automatically terminates and the earnest money returns to the buyer. So if your appraisal comes in with requirements, make sure you stay on top of this time frame and keep the contract moving forward if it's at all possible. The rest of page 2 is the additional provisions. And again, we're not attorneys, so refer to the standard clauses provided by OREC or reach out to your area leader and or broker for assistance if you're needing to write in something there that's not covered in those standard clauses. And then if everybody agrees, we're going to have everybody's signature on this page. If the sellers do not agree, the sellers won't sign this page, but the sellers do have to initial at the bottom of the page, just stating that they've seen this page and they're countering or whatever the case may be for that. So that's the second page of the FHA addendum. The third page includes 2 mandatory clauses that are associated with an FHA loan. The first is the FHA real estate certification, and this is actually signed by the realtors involved as well as the buyers and sellers. And this just says that there's no side agreements that aren't being disclosed in writing to the lender through this contract. So, in this case, maybe Evelyn Harper's going to use her commission to pay the buyer's down payment. If she's doing something like that, 1, it's not legal in Oklahoma, but 2, it would need to be disclosed in writing and part of the contract so the lender's aware of all the extra deals that are going on within this purchase. So that's what the FHA real estate certification is, just saying nobody's paying any costs. There's no side agreements outside of what's in the contract and being represented to the lender. And again, this needs to be signed by buyers and sellers, even if there's a counter offer, and also by the realtors involved in the transaction. And then the final thing on page 3 is the amendatory clause. This is where we talk about what happens if the property doesn't appraise for the full purchase price. So basically, it just says that the buyer isn't obligated to complete the purchase if the property doesn't appraise for the contract price or whatever number you put in. So in this case, the original offer was written for $225,000. So that's what we put in here, that it needs to appraise for that amount. And this, the buyers and sellers both sign and initial at the bottom of the page, regardless of if there is a counter offer or not. So that is FHA loan addendum.